It was the year 1750, and I found myself standing on the bustling docks of Portsmouth, New Hampshire, watching the fog roll in off the Atlantic. I'm James Thornton, a young man born and bred in this rugged New England town, where the salty air clings to your skin like a second coat. Life here was a mix of opportunity and hardship. Folks from all over Europe had come seeking a new start, fleeing famines, wars, and religious crackdowns. Some called it the New World. I called it home, even if it wasn't always kind. The colonies were a patchwork quilt of different lives and ambitions. Up north, fishing boats dotted the horizon, their sails billowing as families traded cod and mackerel. Down south, the air was thick with the scent of tobacco and cotton fields, where wealthy landowners, known as the planters, ruled over vast estates, their fortunes built on the backs of enslaved Africans. It was a world painted with sharp contrasts, the hope of freedom tangled with chains none dared to break. I remember one evening walking through the narrow streets of Portsmouth when I met Elizabeth Harper. She was a vision. A fiery red dress hugged her slender frame, and her dark curls tumbled over bare shoulders, glinting under the flickering gas lamps. Her emerald eyes sparkled mischievously as she laughed, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Elizabeth wasn't like the other girls. There was a daring edge to her, a restless spirit that matched my own. But life wasn't just about stolen glances and whispered promises. Across the mountains to the west, the French held their own colony, a vast wilderness of fur traders and native tribes. Tensions simmered between the British and the French, with whispers of war growing louder every day. The land itself seemed to bristle with uncertainty. One night, over a pint at the tavern, an old sailor named Tom regaled me with tales of native tribes uniting to push back the British, demanding their lands and their freedom. "They want us gone, James," he said gravely, "and I don't blame them, but the Crown won't listen." His words lingered like smoke, heavy and foreboding. Then came the news that set the colonies ablaze. Britain, burdened by war debts, planned to tax us. On tea, of all things. I heard whispers of rebels in Boston, dressed as native warriors, dumping chests of tea into the harbor. Boston Tea Party, they called it. I couldn't help but smirk. Tea was all well and good, but they'd be better off dumping Parliament's rule overboard. With the First Continental Congress convening in Philadelphia, the air crackled with rebellion. Colonists from 12 colonies gathered, united in defiance. I felt a fire ignite within me, a call to stand for something greater than survival. As the boycott of British goods spread, so did the whispers of war, a war that would soon change everything. But that was just the beginning. The road ahead was shrouded in shadows, and as I looked into Elizabeth's eyes one last time before leaving Portsmouth, I couldn't shake the feeling that our world was about to erupt, and no one would be left untouched. And in the distance beyond the Appalachian peaks, something darker stirred, something that would test every ounce of courage I had left. The chill of early spring bit into my fingers as I rode westward from Portsmouth, the worn leather of my saddle creaking beneath me. The road was rough, winding through the dense forests that skirted the Appalachian Mountains, a natural barrier that seemed to guard the secrets of lands unknown. I was on my way to Philadelphia, summoned by letters from relatives who spoke of the growing unrest among the colonies. The city was alive with talk of revolution, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to step into history. Philadelphia itself was a world apart, bustling streets lined with brick buildings, horse-drawn carriages clattering over cobblestones, and men in powdered wigs pacing outside taverns, deep in heated debate. I found lodging at a modest inn called the Gilded Lantern, where the candlelight flickered against the walls, casting shadows as restless as the city itself. It was there I met Samuel Bennett, a sharp-witted lawyer with a penchant for dry humor and a jawline so chiseled it could have been carved by the very mountains outside. He wore a navy blue waistcoat embroidered with silver thread, his cravat slightly askew, giving him the air of a man who'd rather be anywhere but in a suit. "James," he said one evening, swirling a glass of whiskey, "if this revolution goes sideways, I'm blaming you. Or at least you can buy my next drink." I laughed, though inside the weight of what was to come pressed hard against my chest. The tavern buzzed with voices, farmers, merchants, soldiers, all united by a restless energy. The talk was of the First Continental Congress, where representatives from 12 colonies had gathered to challenge British tyranny. A boycott of British goods was underway, but whispers hinted that this was only the beginning. The Crown's grip was tightening, and the colonists were ready to fight back. One night, as the rain hammered against the window panes, a striking woman entered the tavern. Tall and poised, she wore a deep crimson dress that hugged her curves, the fabric shimmering faintly in the firelight. Her dark hair was pinned up with delicate silver combs, and her sharp green eyes scanned the room with a mixture of curiosity and calculation. She introduced herself as Clara Whitman, a cousin of one of the delegates, here to support the cause. Clara's presence was magnetic, and she had a way of speaking that cut through the noise, weaving words that stirred hope and rebellion. Over the next few days I found myself drawn to her, our conversations lingering long after the tavern emptied. There was a subtle tension between us, a dance of glances and half-smiles that set my heart racing, though the dangers outside reminded me of the fragile line we walked. As the Congress debated, news arrived that British troops were marching closer to Boston, ready to quash the uprising. The tension in Philadelphia thickened like fog. Samuel leaned in one evening, voice low. "War's coming, James, and it's going to tear us apart." I nodded, feeling the truth in his words. The colonies were on the brink, and I was about to find out whether I had the courage to stand and fight, or if I'd be swallowed by the storm. But beneath the surface a darker game was unfolding, one that neither the Congress nor the Crown seemed to notice. In the shadows of the city, whispers spoke of secret alliances and betrayals that could change everything. And Clara? Well, there was something about her that didn't quite add up. As I watched her disappear into the night, the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes haunted me. Was she a friend to the cause or a spy playing a dangerous double game? Only time would tell, but one thing was certain. The revolution was about to ignite, and nothing would ever be the same again. The crackling fire cast long shadows across the room as I sat in the dim corner of the gilded lantern, nursing a mug of bitter ale. Philadelphia was restless, the weight of impending war pressing down like the heavy fog that rolled off the Delaware River. Clara's mysterious smile lingered in my mind, her emerald eyes like twin flames, both inviting and warning. I couldn't shake the feeling that beneath her polished exterior was a secret waiting to unravel. Days later, word came that the British had marched into Lexington and Concord. Shots fired. The shot heard round the world, they called it. The colonies were no longer whispering rebellion. They were screaming it. I found myself enlisted among the ranks of the Minutemen, ordinary men turned soldiers overnight. I traded my worn coat for a rough-spun uniform, and the weight of the musket in my hands felt heavier than any burden I'd known. Before leaving, Clara sought me out. She wore a midnight blue dress that shimmered like the starry sky, the neckline daring just enough to hint at the curve of her collarbone. Her raven-black hair cascaded over one shoulder, and her eyes held a strange mixture of fire and sorrow. "James," she whispered, brushing her fingers lightly against my palm, "be careful. The road ahead is darker than you think." I wanted to ask her what she meant, but the urgency of the moment swallowed my words. Instead, I promised to return. Little did I know how much that promise would cost me. The battles were brutal. At Bunker Hill, the smoke curled around us like ghosts, and the air was thick with the stench of gunpowder and fear. I saw friends fall, their faces frozen in a grimace of pain or surprise. War was no romantic tale. It was chaos and blood and cold nights spent shivering in muddy trenches. Yet, even amid the carnage, moments of humanity glimmered. I remember sharing a meager meal with a fellow soldier named Thomas, a giant of a man with a booming laugh and a heart as wide as the ocean. He joked that if the British wanted to win, they'd have to catch us first, and good luck with that, considering half of us couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. Letters from home kept my spirit tethered. Elizabeth's words arrived like lifelines, her voice carried in delicate script, filled with longing and hope. She described Portsmouth's quiet streets, the way the sunlight caught on the harbor's waves, and how she waited for me to come back, alive and free. Her letters smelled faintly of lavender and something sweeter, promise, perhaps, or the innocence I feared slipping away. Back in Philadelphia, Clara's name surfaced again, this time whispered in tavern corners, as someone entwined in espionage, a shadow dancing between loyalties. Samuel warned me to be cautious. War breeds spies as easily as it breeds heroes, he said grimly, and not all who smile are on our side. One evening, as the city's bells tolled a warning of approaching troops, I spotted Clara slipping into a dark alley, clutching a folded parchment. My heart hammered as I debated following her, the line between duty and desire blurring. Before I could move, a hand grasped my shoulder. Samuel's voice was low, urgent. "Whatever you do, James, trust no one, especially those who speak in riddles and wear smiles like armor." The war was no longer just on the battlefield. It was a game of shadows, secrets, and betrayals. And as I prepared to face the next storm, I realized the greatest threat might not be the British Army, but the mysteries lurking within our own ranks. And somewhere, hidden in the folds of that folded parchment Clara carried, lay a secret that could change the fate of the revolution and my own destiny. The dawn broke cold and gray over Philadelphia, the city still clinging to a fragile calm that felt more like the breath before a scream. I couldn't stop thinking about Clara, her midnight blue dress, the way her fingers brushed mine like a whisper of danger. That folded parchment she carried haunted me, a puzzle I was desperate to solve but afraid to touch. I found myself wandering the narrow cobblestone streets, the morning mist curling around gas lamps like ghostly serpents. The city was a labyrinth of secrets, and every shadow seemed to hide a truth waiting to pounce. I stopped at a small bookshop owned by old Mr. Whitaker, a man who looked like he'd swallowed a library and never spit it out. He was the sort who knew things, or at least pretended to, with a twinkle in his eye that suggested he enjoyed the game of misinformation. "Looking for trouble, James?" he asked, his voice gravelly, eyes narrowing beneath bushy brows. "Something like that," I replied. "I'm chasing a ghost." He chuckled, leaning in. "In times like these, ghosts have a nasty habit of turning into traitors." Over the next few days, I pieced together whispers and half-truths. Clara Whitman wasn't just a charming rebel. She was tangled in a web of espionage that stretched from the cobblestones of Philadelphia to the drawing rooms of London. Some said she worked for the Crown, others swore she was a double agent playing both sides. The truth, as always, was buried beneath layers of deception. One evening, I followed her to a secluded warehouse by the docks. She moved like a shadow, her crimson cloak fluttering behind her as she slipped inside. Heart pounding, I crept closer, straining to catch words carried on the wind. Inside, voices murmured in French and English. Plans, alliances, betrayals. Clara's voice was firm, commanding even, as she argued with a man whose face was hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. I caught fragments. The colonies, vulnerable, must not fail. Before I could eavesdrop further, a creaking floorboard betrayed my presence. The man spun around, revealing a cruel smile. "Well, well, what do we have here? A curious patriot." Clara's eyes flashed, and for a moment I thought she might reach for a hidden dagger. Instead, she stepped forward, cool as ice. "James," she said, voice dripping with a mix of regret and steel, "sometimes the line between friend and enemy isn't as clear as we wish." I swallowed hard, realizing the woman I'd been drawn to was both my greatest hope and my deepest betrayal. The next days blurred into a whirlwind of suspicion and heartbreak. Samuel warned me to stay away, but my loyalty was torn. I confronted Clara beneath the flickering gaslight of the tavern, her dress now a deep forest green, hugging her slender frame with a subtle elegance that belied the storm inside her. "Why?" I demanded. "Why play this dangerous game?" She looked at me, pain flickering in those emerald eyes. "Because the revolution isn't just about freedom from the crown, James. It's about survival. And sometimes survival means making impossible choices." As the city braced for war, I realized I was caught between loyalty and deception, love and betrayal. And in the shadows, a secret more dangerous than any musket ball was waiting to explode. Little did I know, the choices I made next would change everything. Not just for me, but for the future of the colonies themselves. And somewhere, deep beneath the streets of Philadelphia, a hidden message waited to be uncovered. A message that could turn the tide of the revolution, or drown it forever. The city of Philadelphia was no longer just a backdrop to revolution. It had become a stage for secrets, lies, and tangled loyalties that threatened to unravel everything I believed in. After my confrontation with Clara, the air between us was thick with unspoken words and dangerous truths. I walked the streets feeling like a man caught in a spider's web, every step uncertain, every shadow suspect. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the smoky skyline, I found myself drawn to Independence Hall. The grand brick building stood solemn, its windows glowing faintly in the twilight. Inside, the Continental Congress was locked in fierce debate. I slipped through the crowd, catching fragments of fiery speeches about liberty and the price we were all about to pay. Suddenly, a hand grasped my arm. It was Samuel, eyes sharp as ever beneath his unruly mop of hair. "James, you need to see this," he hissed, pulling me into a quiet corner. He produced a crumpled letter, its edges stained and torn. "Found this in Clara's room. It's coded. Plans for a British attack, hidden in plain sight." My pulse quickened. "How do you know it's real?" Samuel smirked. "Because it mentions the warehouse by the docks. Where you eavesdropped. Clara's playing a dangerous game, but maybe she's not the villain we thought." The thought unsettled me. Could Clara be a double agent? Or worse, a pawn caught in a game far bigger than either of us? Determined to decode the letter, I enlisted the help of Abigail, a sharp-minded woman who ran a printing press in the city. Abigail was a vision in a fitted burgundy dress, her dark hair pinned back with simple ivory combs, revealing a neck that seemed too graceful for the harsh realities of war. She had an intelligence that sparkled brighter than any jewel, and a wit that could cut through the thickest fog of doubt. As we worked late into the night, the letter's meaning slowly unraveled, a secret British offensive planned to strike at the heart of the colonial militias. The betrayal cut deep. Someone close to the Congress was feeding information to the enemy, and Clara's name hovered like a question mark in the shadows. But just as we pieced the final clues together, the city was rocked by an explosion. The sound shattered windows and hearts alike, smoke curling into the night sky like a sinister warning. The warehouse by the docks, the very place where I had spied on Clara, was ablaze, consumed by fire and chaos. Men shouted orders, and soldiers scrambled into formation as the stench of burning timber filled the air. I pushed through the crowd, desperate to find Clara, to understand her role in this deadly game. Samuel caught up with me, his face grim. "She's missing, James, vanished without a trace." The line between friend and foe blurred beyond recognition. Was Clara a traitor who had fled, or a victim caught in the crossfire? I didn't know, but I was certain of one thing. The revolution was no longer just a battle against the British crown. It was a struggle to uncover the truth, hidden beneath layers of deceit. As flames licked the night sky, I vowed to find Clara, and the answers she carried. But what I didn't realize was that the secrets we unearthed would lead me into a darkness darker than any battlefield, where trust was a luxury none could afford. And somewhere, behind the smoke and mirrors, a shadowy figure watched, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The smoke from the burning warehouse still hung thick over the docks the morning after the fire, turning the rising sun into a dull, angry orb. I stood at the edge of the chaos, the acrid sting in my throat a cruel reminder of how close we'd come to disaster. Clara was gone, vanished into the city's labyrinth of alleys and secrets, and with her, the fragile thread holding my hope together. The city was buzzing with rumors. Some said she'd fled to the Loyalists, others whispered she'd been captured. Or worse, I refused to believe she was a traitor. Something about her had always felt like a risk worth taking, even if it meant walking blindfolded through a minefield. Samuel and I regrouped at the Gilded Lantern, the tavern's usual warmth now tinged with unease. The flickering candles cast long shadows over Samuel's furrowed brow as he spread out maps and letters across the scarred wooden table. "If Clara's involved, it's bigger than we thought," he muttered. "Someone high up is leaking information, and they're cleaning house." I ran a hand through my hair, frustration twisting inside me. But why risk everything? What's the endgame? Samuel shook his head. "Power, control, fear. Pick your poison. War brings out the worst in men." I needed answers, and the only place left to look was the heart of the city's underworld. The docks after dark were a different beast. Fog rolling in from the river, lanterns casting eerie glows on slick cobblestones, and shadows dancing between crates and barrels like ghosts at a masquerade. I slipped through the maze, every sense on high alert. That's when I heard the softest of footsteps behind me. Turning sharply, I came face to face with a figure cloaked in deep black, her face half hidden beneath a hood. My heart skipped. "Clara?" She pulled back the hood, revealing eyes that burned with fierce determination and exhaustion. Her dress was a muted shade of gray, clinging to her slender frame, the fabric worn but elegant in a way that spoke of secrets kept close. "We don't have much time, James," she whispered, voice barely audible over the lapping waves. "They're coming for me and for you." I wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but she pressed a folded note into my hand before vanishing into the mist. The paper was brittle, the ink smudged, but the message was clear. A meeting was set with those who held the keys to the conspiracy. Trust no one. Returning to Samuel, I unfolded the note. It was an address, a rundown manor on the outskirts of the city. "This could be our chance to expose the traitors," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. Samuel nodded grimly. "Or it could be a trap." That night, beneath a sky heavy with stars, we approached the manor. The air was thick with tension, every creak of the wind a warning. Inside, the dimly lit hall was filled with figures cloaked in shadows, their faces hidden behind masks that gleamed in the candlelight. The leader stepped forward, a tall man with icy blue eyes and a voice like velvet dipped in steel. "Welcome, gentlemen," he said, eyes locking onto me. "You've been asking questions. Dangerous questions." I squared my shoulders. "We want the truth." He smiled thinly. "Truth is a luxury in times of war. But perhaps we can come to an arrangement." The room seemed to close in, the weight of betrayal pressing down like a noose. I glanced at Samuel, then at the empty chair where Clara should have been. And in that moment I realized the revolution was not just a battle for independence. It was a deadly game of shadows, where every ally could be an enemy, and every secret had a price. As the man's smile deepened, a chilling thought took root. How far was I willing to go to save the woman I loved and the country I barely recognized? Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying a warning I could no longer ignore. The darkest hour was yet to come. The manor's heavy oak doors creaked shut behind us, sealing me and Samuel inside a room thick with whispered threats and half-truths. The flickering candlelight cast eerie shadows on the faces behind the masks, faces that could belong to friend or foe, patriot or traitor. My heart pounded like a drum in my chest, every instinct screaming that this was a trap, but I had no choice but to play along. The man with the icy blue eyes, he introduced himself as Charles Whitmore, a name that carried weight in both London and the colonies, leaned forward, his voice smooth as silk. "James Thornton, Samuel Bennett, you seek the truth. But are you prepared for the cost?" I swallowed hard. "We're prepared for whatever it takes to save our cause." Whitmore's smile was sharp, like a blade hidden beneath velvet. "Very well. The revolution you believe in is but a pawn in a greater game. There are forces at work, men who would see these colonies crushed to keep their power intact." Samuel's eyes narrowed. "You're saying there's a conspiracy within the revolution itself?" "Exactly." Whitmore nodded slowly. "And Clara Whitman. She walks a dangerous line, caught between loyalties. She's no traitor, but neither is she a simple patriot. She works to protect a secret that could change everything." My mind raced. Protect a secret? What could be so vital that it would cost lives and betrayals? Whitmore's gaze locked onto mine. "There is a document, hidden, coded, powerful. It contains truths that could unite or destroy us all. Clara holds the key." Before I could respond, the manor's doors burst open. Soldiers in British red surged in, weapons drawn. Chaos erupted, shouts, the clash of steel, the crack of muskets. Samuel grabbed my arm. "We need to get out, now." In the frenzy, I caught a glimpse of Clara slipping through a hidden passage, her eyes fierce and determined. She called out, "James, follow me." We darted through narrow corridors, the walls closing in like the jaws of a beast. The passage led us to a secret cellar beneath the manor, damp and dark, except for the glow of a single lantern. Clara stood waiting, clutching a small, leather-bound book. Her dress was torn, but she held herself with unyielding grace. "This," she said breathlessly, pressing the book into my hands, "is the truth they want buried. It reveals the plans to divide the colonies, to keep us weak and controlled. If it falls into the wrong hands, the revolution will die before it begins." I looked down at the book, its cover worn but heavy with promise. "We have to get this to Congress." Clara's eyes locked with mine, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through her fearless facade. "And we have to survive long enough to do it." Just then, the sound of footsteps echoed above. The British were closing in. Samuel drew his sword, voice steady. "Time to make our stand." The three of us braced ourselves, hearts pounding as the walls seemed to tremble with the weight of what was to come. Outside, the city held its breath, unaware that the fate of the revolution, and the secrets within that leather-bound book, hung by a thread. And in the depths of the manor, a shadow moved silently, watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The battle was just beginning. The cold stone of the cellar pressed against my back as we crouched in the shadows, the leather-bound book heavy in my grasp. Clara's breath came in shallow whispers, her emerald eyes flickering with a fierce determination that cut through the darkness. Samuel's sword gleamed faintly in the lantern light, his jaw clenched tight, ready for whatever was coming through that creaking staircase above. The British soldiers descended with the weight of thunder, their boots pounding against the wooden steps. I could almost hear the cold gleam in their eyes, the certainty that this was the end for us. But surrender wasn't in our blood. Not yet. Clara leaned close, voice barely more than a breath. "There's a hidden tunnel beneath that trap door. It leads to the old sewers and out to the river. We can escape, if we move fast." I nodded, heart hammering. "Lead the way." With careful hands, Clara lifted the trap door. A dank, musty smell rose from the depths below, a stench of forgotten things and shadows. One by one, we slipped into the narrow tunnel, the walls slick with moisture, the darkness swallowing us whole. The sounds of pursuit echoed behind us, but the tunnel swallowed the noise as we crept forward, water lapping at our boots. Clara's dress clung to her like a second skin, the fabric torn and damp, revealing the graceful curve of her neck and the subtle line of her collarbone. Despite the grime and danger, there was an undeniable allure to her, a mix of strength and vulnerability that held me captive. As we emerged near the riverbank, dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The city awoke around us, oblivious to the deadly game that had just unfolded beneath its feet. We found a small rowboat hidden among the reeds. Samuel pushed off, muscles straining as he propelled us into the cold river. The current was swift, carrying us away from the manor and the shadows that sought to claim us. Hours later, we reached the outskirts of Philadelphia, where the first rays of sun warmed our chilled skin. Clara unwrapped the leather book, revealing pages filled with coded letters, maps, and names, evidence of a vast conspiracy to sabotage the revolution from within. "I never wanted you caught in this," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "But the truth has to come out." I looked at her, the woman who had become both my greatest hope and my deepest mystery. "We'll expose them, together." But even as we made plans, a chilling thought crept into my mind. If the revolution was riddled with traitors, how many more like Clara were out there, walking among us, wearing masks as easily as they breathed? That night, as we parted ways in a quiet tavern, Clara pressed a folded note into my hand. "This is the next piece of the puzzle," she whispered. "Find the man they call the Raven. He holds the final key." I watched her slip into the shadows, her silhouette framed by the flickering lantern light, the curve of her hips swaying with a dangerous grace. The revolution was far from over, and the deeper I dug, the darker the secrets became. And somewhere, in the twisting alleys of Philadelphia, the Raven waited, his identity cloaked in mystery, his loyalty unknown. The game of shadows was just beginning. The streets of Philadelphia at night were a different world. Whispers clung to the fog like smoke from a dying fire, and shadows moved with a life of their own. Clutching the folded note Clara had given me, I navigated the labyrinth of alleys and lantern-lit corners, every nerve on edge. The name, the Raven, felt like a ghost, elusive and haunting. The address led me to a rundown tavern tucked between a blacksmith's forge and a row of shuttered shops. The wooden sign creaked in the breeze. The Black Crow. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of stale ale and burning hearths, voices low and cautious. I scanned the room, my eyes adjusting to the dim light, until they settled on a man seated alone in the far corner. He was lean, with sharp features carved from years of hard living. His dark hair fell in messy waves, eyes like polished obsidian that seemed to see right through me. A black cloak draped over his shoulders, and a silver raven pin glinted on his lapel, the unmistakable mark. I approached cautiously. "You're the Raven." He looked up, a slow, knowing smile curling his lips. "And you must be James Thornton. I've heard whispers about you." We talked in hushed tones, sharing truths and half-truths over mugs of bitter cider. The Raven was a man who walked the razor's edge, neither fully friend nor foe, but someone whose allegiance was bought and sold, like the coins jingling in his pocket. He revealed a tangled web of spies, double agents, and secret alliances, some loyal to the crown, others to shadowy figures seeking to control the colonies for their own gain. The leather-bound book Clara carried was only the beginning. "There's a list," he said quietly, sliding a worn parchment across the table. "Names of those involved in the conspiracy. If we expose them, the revolution can be saved." But the list came with a price. The Raven warned that powerful men would stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried. "You're playing a dangerous game, James. One false move, and it could be the end for you and everyone you care about." I nodded, feeling the weight of the burden settle over me like a shroud. As I left the Black Crow, the night air was cold against my skin, the city's shadows stretching long and unforgiving. The next morning, news spread of an assassination attempt on a prominent delegate. The city teetered on the edge of chaos, trust unraveling like frayed rope. I realized the conspiracy was closer than I'd feared, woven into the very fabric of the revolution. That evening, as I prepared to meet Samuel and Clara to share what I'd learned, a sudden knock echoed through my lodgings. I opened the door to find a sealed envelope resting on the doorstep, marked only with a black raven. Inside was a single line of chilling script: "Beware the friend who smiles too brightly." My blood ran cold. The enemy was not just out there. It was here, among us, hidden behind masks more convincing than any disguise. And as the sun set over Philadelphia, I knew the final act was approaching, and with it a betrayal that would shatter everything I thought I knew. The revolution's fate, and my own, hung by a thread thinner than a raven's feather. The candle flickered low in my cramped room, shadows dancing on the walls like restless spirits. That chilling note, sealed with the black raven, lay on the wooden table before me, a stark reminder that in this war, the deadliest enemy wore the mask of a friend. My hands trembled as I folded it away, knowing that trust was a currency far more precious and far scarier than any coin. I met Clara and Samuel beneath the swollen branches of an old elm tree just outside the city's edge. Clara's emerald eyes held a fierce light, her midnight green dress catching the fading sun as she moved with a poised urgency. Samuel's rugged face was etched with worry, his worn coat dusted from days on the road. "We have to act fast," Clara said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "The list the Raven gave us. It names men in Congress, officers in the militia, even people close to the governor. If they learn we have it," Samuel finished the thought grimly, "we're dead." We devised a plan to expose the conspiracy during the next Congress meeting, a daring gambit to bring the traitors into the light. But as we prepared, a sudden thunderstorm rolled in, the sky darkening as if the heavens themselves sensed the coming tempest. The day of reckoning arrived with a suffocating tension. The chamber buzzed with nervous energy as delegates took their seats, unaware that the fate of the revolution hung in the balance. I stood beside Clara and Samuel, the leather-bound book and the list hidden beneath my coat, like a ticking bomb. Just as the first speaker rose to address the assembly, the doors burst open. Soldiers flooded the room, weapons drawn. At their head was a man I never expected to see, Charles Whitmore. His icy blue eyes scanned the crowd, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "Order!" he commanded, voice cold and unyielding. "You are all under arrest for treason against the crown." Gasps and cries erupted. Chaos threatened to drown us all. In the chaos, Clara seized the moment, stepping forward with a voice that cut through the noise like a blade. "You're wrong, Whitmore. The true traitors are here among us, men who would sell the colonies for power and greed." She held up the leather-bound book, the evidence undeniable. The room stilled, eyes turning toward the men named on the list. Suddenly a shot rang out. The chamber erupted into pandemonium. In the fray, I caught a glimpse of a figure slipping through a side door, a shadow disappearing into the storm outside. I recognized the silhouette instantly. Clara. The last thing she said before vanishing into the tempest was a whisper meant only for me. Find the truth, James. No matter the cost. The chamber descended into chaos, and I was left standing alone amidst the shattered trust and broken dreams of a revolution on the edge. Outside, the rain washed the blood and betrayal from the streets, but the scars would remain, deep and raw. And somewhere, hidden beneath the storm, a new shadow stirred, a secret that would shake the very foundation of the colonies. The game was far from over, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my core, that the next chapter would demand everything I had, and more, because the fight for freedom was only beginning, and the darkest secrets were still waiting to be unearthed.